Good evening, everybody. I am making a series of videos going over the prescribed grade 11 poetry for the South African curriculum as of 2020. The curriculum changes that were made during our first term, so that was mid-January, early February. The first poem that I'm starting off with is by Ingrid Jonker. She lived from 1933 to 1965. She is a very well-known South African poet, lived during the apartheid era. Many of her poems criticize what was going on at the time. Her father worked for the parliament and the cabinet in censorship, and obviously, if you know the history, the two of them definitely did not see eye to eye. And if you follow her poems and you read them, you definitely get a sense of the divide between the two of them. So the poem that we are looking at in particular is The Child Who Was Shot Dead by Soldiers in Nyanga. This is a historical poem. I'm not sure if you could classify it as protest poetry. You do definitely get a sense that she is criticizing what was done, the murder of the child, and how people reacted to it. And towards the end of the poem, you can also see the effects of that event and the far-reaching consequences and results that it had. So I'm going to read out the poem and then I will explain the annotations. And the second video will be going over the questions and the essay question, because when it comes for exam time in your paper 2 for the scene poetry, there are 3 scene poems. 2 of them will have contextual questions and 1 of them will have an essay topic. So it's very good to get an idea of what's expected, how you write one, and all of that. You will also notice that points 1 to 14 are part of the original poem. So this poem that you've been given for the annotation and the studying for the exam is actually printed differently. So the book that the teachers are using, that is CAPS certified, is poems from all around the world. It's a blue cover, it's got a picture of the world, and this is the printed copy in that particular book. So without further ado, let me read. The child is not dead. The child raises his fists against his mother, who screams Africa, screams the smell of freedom and heather, in the locations of the heart under siege. The child raises his fists against his father, in the march of the generations, who scream Africa, scream the smell of justice and blood, in the streets of his armed pride. The child is not at Langa, nor at Nyanga, nor at Orlando, nor at Sharpeville, nor at the police station in Philippi, where he lies with a bullet in his head. The child is the shadows of the soldiers, on guard with guns, saracens, and batons. The child is present at all the meetings and legislations. The child peeps through the windows of houses and into the hearts of mothers. The child who just wanted to play in the sun at Nyanga is everywhere. The child who became a man treks through all of Africa. The child who became a giant travels through the whole world without a pass. So, in the original poem, raises is lifts, screams is shouts, smell is breath, and so it continues. And the book doesn't really give a reason for why it's printed a different interpretation. Perhaps they wanted to make it more relatable, more understandable. They've substituted rifles for guns. Instead of saying cordoned heart, they've said the heart under siege. So it's possible that they tried to make it a little bit simpler. Perhaps the person who translated it from Afrikaans into English, maybe they had a different set of rules or dictionary definitions. But no matter which interpretation you have, I do feel that the main message of the poem is carried through. And remember, whatever poem is printed on the exam page, the one that you are given to study, that is the one that you are tested on. So don't feel like you are now at a disadvantage. Again, like I've said in my other videos, these are done for the benefit of my students during this COVID pandemic. However, any other grade 11 child who is studying for the exams in a South African curriculum context, you will definitely benefit from these videos. So, firstly, we have repetition. The child is not dead. The child is not dead. So you might say to me, but that's only twice. The point is, it's repeated. And nothing is done in a poem without it being done on purpose. So if you look at the title, The Child Who Was Shot Dead, and now it's repeated that the child is not dead. Obviously, the poet wants us to look at something very, very specific. Secondly, the child, the child, the child. Again and again, it's repeated, the child. And the main reason for that is to show the victim's innocence. That this is a person young, full of life, and the brutality of the act. They shot a child, okay? Not somebody running away, as bad as that is. Not somebody who was a prisoner who tried to escape. Nothing like that. This was a child, okay? Another thing that you notice is some green and brown underlining that I've done for the annotations. So screams the smell, scream the smell, shouts the breath. No matter which one you're referring to with that green underline, that is what we call synesthesia. And what that means is you are using contradictory senses. You can't scream a smell. Okay, you can't shout a breath, if that makes sense. And it just creates a very, very vivid image. It's almost like the smell has a personality of its own, synesthesia. Okay. Then the heart under siege. So the heart under siege is a heart that is beset by something that is attacking it. Okay, generally we think of wartime, a town that is under siege, nobody's allowed out, nobody's allowed inside. It's a tactic in order to get the city to surrender because food, water, medical care, all of that is shut off. Okay, it's not allowed anymore. So it's a tactic, strategic tactic. The locations of the heart can be referring to the townships where most of the people lived who were working in the mines, in the cities, etc. Excuse me. So locations as in townships, but also where the heart is situated, the location of the heart. You will notice that there is a gap between the child raising his fists against his mother and the child raising his fists against his father. So what we have here is a generational gap. It mentions later on in the march of the generations. It's possible that the mother and the father had just come to accept their lot in life, the restrictions, the rules, the passbooks. This is just how life is. But the child, the youth, they are against this. They have been born into it, and you would expect that they wouldn't really see life any differently, but it's almost like they've got the idea that this is wrong, that this shouldn't be happening. And now they're raising their fists against the generation who seem complacent. Okay, complacent is accepting, resigned yourself to the fact. Okay. screaming the smell of freedom and heather. So freedom and the veld, okay? The bush veld. Remember Johannesburg, um, where most of the poetry is written about and from. You've got the idea of the high veld, sort of the rugged beauty of Johannesburg and, the other areas, and freedom. We want to be able to do what we want to do, when we want to do it, where we want to do it, and with who. Then you've got scream the smell of justice and blood in the streets of his armed pride. So, what happened as a child rising up in the first stanza, in the second stanza, we see the child actually marching, okay, going to the streets, his armed pride, okay, his pride, his dignity as a person, own nationality, etc., culture, heritage, now taking to the streets. And then we have the repetition, the child is not dead. And not at these four places: Langa, Nyanga, Orlando, and Sharpeville. So these are areas, if you know your South African history, where there were other shootings, riots, etc., where children came off second best. People died, people were murdered, okay? So this child is now representing other children who died, okay, at least in terms of the poet, okay, Ingrid Jonker herself. She's using the child as a representative, okay, speaking, acting on behalf of all the other terrible, tragic events, okay? So those are four places. The reason I haven't underlined the police station in Philippi is because that is where the child is. It's not a separate event, okay, where he lies with a bullet in his head. So you've gone from this protest, celebration of freedom, taking to the streets, back to a reminder of what actually happened. The child is lying there with a bullet in his head, okay, not his arm, not his leg, his head, okay. Then it goes on to say where the child is and what it is. So the child is the shadow of the soldiers. Wherever soldiers gather, wherever the police gather, no matter what riot or protest or march, the child is in that shadow. The memory is not gone. Okay, a Saracen is an armored vehicle. It's what they would use in riots, especially in. You can even see in other countries when things get really, really bad, the army will roll out these armored vehicles for their protection, etc. The child is present in all the meetings and legislations. So wherever laws are passed and policies are made and bills are ratified, etc., okay, it's speaking about the legal implications. So where all of this is happening, the child is there. Because right at the back of it, people know that this child was shot just because he was in the wrong place, in the wrong time, according to the law. Okay? So these would be the laws about restrictions, the homelands, the townships, illegal, legal, the passbook, etc. The child peeps through the windows of houses and into the hearts of mothers. So this is now looking at the emotional, the sentiment, the sort of tenderness, the nurturing side of the matter. So when these people get together, when the families get together, they know what happened. So that memory lingers, okay, in the hearts of the mothers, in the windows of houses. The child who just wanted to play in the sun, again, the poet's doing it deliberately to show the brutality of the act. The child who became a man treks through all of Africa. So these last three lines are actually the repercussions of the event. This event was one of the very few or first that put South Africa on national news. okay, during the apartheid era, okay, that the fact that the soldiers shot the child, okay. So as now he's become a man, he's moving through the whole of Africa. The story is spreading, okay. The child who became a giant, okay, he traveled the whole world. People in America, England, Australia, other places, they found out about this. And then as a last jab to, the parliament, the cabinet, the people making the decisions at the time, how does he do this? Without a pass. So no matter what bills, legislation, authority, no matter what they tried to do, cover up, censorship, this story got out and it spread like wildfire, and without a pass, without their permission. All right, so that is the basics of the poem. I've explained all the underlining, the repetition, the synesthesia, etc. For the next video, I'm going to go over the questions, how to answer them, and the essay question. Thank you.